in the book of Exodus, the 17th chapter, beginning with verse 1 and concluding with verse number 6. In the book of Exodus, the second book of the Bible, chapter 17, verses 1 through 6, we are prepared to answer the question, is there a word from the Lord? I'm going to read these words in your hearing, and I'm going to ask that we'll all read verse 6 together. And all the congregation of the children of Israel journeyed from the wilderness of Sin after their journeys according to the commandment of the Lord, and pitched in Rephidim. Somebody say Rephidim. And there was no water for the people to drink. Wherefore the people did chide with Moses, and said, Give us water that we may drink. And Moses said unto him, Why do you chide with me? Wherefore do you tempt the Lord God? And the people thirsted there for water. And the people murmured against Moses and said, Wherefore is this that thou hast brought us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our cattle with thirst? And Moses cried with a loud voice, saying, What shall I do unto this people? They are about ready to stone me. And the Lord said unto Moses, Go on. Somebody shout, Go on. Before the people, and take with thee of the elders of Israel and thy rod wherewith thou smotest the river. Take in thy hand and go. Behold, I will stand before thee, and there upon the rock in Horeb, and thou shalt smite the rock. Somebody shall smite the rock. And there shall come water out of it, that the people may drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. Shall we read verse 6 again? Behold, I will stand before thee, there upon the rock in Horeb, and thou shalt smite the rock, and there shall come water out of it, that the people may drink. He did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. Father, in the name of Jesus, we thank you for the saturation of your spirit. Father, I tell you, thank you for everything that you have done in our midst. I thank you for every mountain we have already climbed, for every valley we have already conquered. Father, I thank you for every giant that has already been killed. I thank you for every devil that has been chased back to hell. Father, I thank you for victory over sickness. I thank you for victory over struggles. And I most of all thank you for victory over death. But because you died on Friday, but got up on Sunday morning, we have a right to the tree of life. Now, Father, use me in this moment not to be seen, not to be glorified. Block out all distractions, anything that may cloud my thoughts. Block out anything that may stop this word from going forth into your people. Father, I ask that you will have your way. It's in Jesus' name we do pray. And the people of God said together, Amen. You may be seated in the presence of God. I'm going to talk to you from the subject, finding water in dry places. Finding water in dry places. Now, I got to preach twice today, so y'all give me some amens right here. Finding water in dry places. For 430 years, Israel suffered under Egyptian slavery, forced to make bricks to build the treasure cities of Egypt. How demoralizing it must have been, working without compensation to build temples for gods you don't worship, and storehouses for money you can't access. Even in our modern history, how difficult it is to work hard to make other folk rich. Somebody ought to say amen. Make other folks rich while we still are stuck in poverty and in struggle. For 430 years they suffered, but Pharaoh made a grave mistake. Dr. Emmanuel Scott stated in a sermon, the oppressor's mistake was allowing the oppressed to go to church. Because it was when they worshiped God, even in the midst of a demoralizing circumstances and an uncertain future, they woke every morning with the energy to fight for one more day. riding in the back of buses, eating in the back of restaurants, and even today with all of the injustices that plague our community, when we worship, we find strength and endurance. And it is in this strength that allows us to walk back in the same environment, but with a new attitude. Singing, Lord, in the word of the old song, Lord, you don't have to move my mountain, but just give me the strength to climb. Because worship teaches us that transformation does not always happen in your situation. Sometimes God does not change the situation. He transforms you so you can go back in the same situation, but with a new mindset. The Bible reveals countless examples of God transforming us before he touches the situation. Because if God can transform your mind, he does not have to change your situation. If God changes your thinking, he does not have to change your situation. In fact, when he changes your mind, he empowers you to change your situation. Right here in the text, we find that Peter, you remember the story, Peter's in the midst of a storm. Jesus calls him out of a ship. Peter says, Lord, if it be thou, bid me to come walking on the water. Jesus says, come on. I got news for you. You better be careful what you ask the Lord. Because he told him to come on, walk on water. He said, Lord, if it's you, let me walk on water. Jesus said, come on. Somebody shout, come on. He comes and he walks on water. Guess what? The storm is still raging. The lightning is still flashing. But Peter, as long as he kept his eyes on Jesus, walked on water. And I got news for you. When you know you can walk on water, you're not afraid of the storm anymore. When I know I have the power to walk on water, let the storm come, let the floods go, because if the water gets too high, I don't have to swim, I just walk on top of it. Because God has transformed my mind, I can walk back in the same situation, but with a new mind. Here in our text, here the nation walks into a new situation with a new problem. Verse 1 says, they pitched in Rephidim. Somebody shout Rephidim. And there was no water for the people to drink. Notice verse 1 says their arrival was not accidental. They arrived in the place called Rephidim, a place with no water, but verse 1 reveals that they were following God. They were following God, Dr. Lee, but they wind up in a place of no water. Therefore, verse 1 is either a question or it's revelation. It's either a question by saying, why would God lead his people to a place with no water? Or is revelation suggesting to us that God often leads his people to dry places? Either why would God lead them to dry places? Or it's revelation that God often leads his people to dry places. Y'all got to talk to me here. If it's revelation that shows us that God leads his people to dry places, the first option does not make much sense to me, because it puts God in an unusual position. Because if we don't know why God led them there, it's because it would suggest that God was unaware of the water situation in the land. If I had to ask the question, why did God lead them there, Brother Levine? That tells me God, maybe he just didn't know that it wasn't water. I wish I can talk to somebody here. But the problem with that is it makes God more of an explorer than a leader. I wish I can talk to somebody here. That means God does not know as much as I do. That means when I get to a new situation, God is trying to figure it out before when I get there. It means as if God does not know what I'm going to face on tomorrow. So I just got to depend that maybe he got enough power to work it out when I get there. But I don't serve a God that's an explorer. I serve a God that's the creator of the whole round world. My Bible says that God is all-powerful, three attributes of God. God is omnipresent, God is omnipotent, and God is everywhere at the same time. God is all-powerful, God is all-knowing, God is everywhere at the same time. So my God is not an explorer, my God is the leader, which means before we got to the dry place, God was already there. Before we got to the dry place, because he was already there, he already knew it was no water there. Because God was already there, because God already knew there was no water there, then God had already worked out how he was going to bring water out of a dry place. What I'm trying to get you to understand, when you understand who God is, God don't have to figure out your problem because he done already worked out your problem. Anybody know before you get to a bad situation, God is already there waiting on you, and he done already worked it out. Before you get to a devil, God done already walked in with that devil and done already said, no weapon formed against my children shall be able to prosper. Y'all gonna walk with me here. God is not an explorer. God is a leader. He was already there. He already knew the situation because he had all power. He already knew there was nothing there that he could not handle. Therefore, before they arrived, he was already there. And because he was already there, he knew the problem. And because he knew the problem, he had already worked out the solution. Salem, don't miss when I tell this. Before you arrive at your problem, God had already worked out your solution. Before we make it there, God's already worked there. But watch this. Don't miss me when I tell you this. Therefore, our job is not to figure out our problems. Our job is to figure out God's will. Now, y'all got to catch me. I said our job is not to figure out our problems, but it's to figure out the will of God. What if we spent as much time trying to discover God's will than we do trying to figure out our problems? Most of us stay up all night trying to figure out our problems. But when's the last time you stayed up trying to figure out if I'm in the will? Y'all better wake up and talk to me here. If I'm in the will of God. Maybe that's why during this Black History Month that we focus back on our great-great-grandparents who had far less stuff than we had. But they wasn't on all the pills that we on. They had far less than we had, but their blood pressure was under control. Their diabetes was under. Y'all better wake up and talk to me here. They didn't have Cadillacs, they had mules, and they had wagons, and they had a right foot and a left foot, but they had joy in their heart. Maybe. We got degrees, we got bachelors, we got masters, we got PhDs. Half of them, a lot of them couldn't even read nor write, but they knew how to depend on the will of God. I wish I had a witness here. Some of us are too smart. Oh, y'all ain't gonna pray with me. Some of us feel when we so educated, we got to help God out. But I got news is God don't need your help. I said, God don't need your help. God don't need your input. God don't need your 2 cents. If you don't believe me, go to the book of Job. When Job said, God, you don't know how the world works. If you do good, you get good. If you do bad, you do bad. God said, wait a minute, young man. Stand up and gird yourself before me. Were you there when I scooped out the oceans? Were you there when I laid the foundations of the world? Were you there when I hung the moon in the sky? And if you wasn't there, don't try to tell me that you know how the world works, because I'm the one that said light, and light came. I wish I can talk. Somebody ought to tell your neighbor, God don't need no help. What we got to do is figure out his will. When I'm faced with a problem, I don't need to waste all my energy trying to figure out how I'm going to handle it. I need to figure out, God, how you're going to use it, because your word promised me all things work together for good for them that love the Lord. Am I talking right this morning here? The lesson here is God, watch this. The reason he led them there is because he had power over there. The reason he leads us to dry places is to let us know that he got power over dry places. Now, let me be clear. A dry place is any place you can't survive without God. A dry place is any place you can't handle without God. A hospital can be a dry place. A living room can be a dry place. Your job can be a dry place. The pew you sitting on can be a dry place. I wish I can talk to somebody here. I know y'all look good, but we're going to be real just this morning here. Where all of us got some experience in some dry places. There's some folk you can't be around unless the Lord is with you. I wish I can talk to somebody here. Y'all already know who they are. That's why you didn't sit next to them this morning. There's some folk that you know you can't handle without God. There's some jobs you know you couldn't stand unless God is with you. We all got some dry places, but the blessing is, watch this, wherever God leads you, he's got power over what you will face. Notice the problem was a lack of water. No water. Somebody shout, no water. We are aware that in a desert region, water is necessary. It's a requirement for sustaining life. Therefore, people center their lives and position themselves around sources of water. In this time, in a desert region, when the water dried up, two things either happened. Either the people moved or the people died, because when droughts came, it was a life or death situation. You remember the widow of Zarephath in the midst of a drought. It hadn't rained for 40 days. She was gathering 2 sticks to make her last cake, to go home, eat it with her son, and die because there was no rain. When there's a drought, it's a life or death situation because water is so central to life. It's striking to me that God will lead his people to a land with no water. It was a place that could not provide life. It was a place that could not sustain its people. It was a place that could not refresh its people. It was a place that could not maintain its people. Yet, watch when I tell you this, its lack of resources is only an issue if you believe your life is based on your position. Refrium is only a problem if you believe your life comes from the land. It's only a problem if you believe your life is tied up in people. It's only a problem if you believe your livelihood is tied up in corporate America. But I got news for you. If Refrium is your only source of life, then verse 1 is a tragedy. But if God is the source of your strength, if God is the strength of your life, God has a way of providing resources even in the midst of a dry place, because it reveals you can pitch your tent in a dry place, but you still can be refreshed. You still can be maintained. You still can be sustained. You still can be renewed. It's because my strength is not tied up in my position. My strength is not tied up in where I live, where I work. My strength is tied up in my relationship with God. I got news for you. Your livelihood, your strength is not in a position. It's in your relationship with God. It's in my relationship with God. God is the only one that satisfies my thirst. God is the only one that wakes me up in the morning. God is the only one that gives me strength for a new day. God is the only one that feeds me when I'm hungry. God is the only one that can heal me when I'm sick. God is the only one that can give me joy when I'm crying. God is the only one that can give me peace when I'm confused. God is the only one that can give me joy in depression. God is the only one that can give me stability in an unstable environment. God is the only one that can give me joy in the midst of death. God is the only one that can give me money in the midst of lack. God is the only one that can keep my lights on. God is the only one that can keep my heart beating. God is the only one that wakes me up. God is the only one that puts a smile on my face. God is the only one that makes me wave my hands. God is the only one that gives me joy. God is the only one that gives me strength. God is the only one that can make me shout. Anybody know if it had not been for God? It's not in the land. It's in God. I don't know about you, but the land can give you a reason to be depressed. But God can give you a reason to say, this is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. Your bank account can make you depressed. But God can say, if you're faithful over a few things, I'll make you ruler over many things. Your job can bring you down, but God can say, no weapon formed against me shall be able to prosper. The doctor can break your heart and hurt your feelings, but I serve a God that got enough medicine in the hem of his garment to make everything all right. Nobody but God. God is the one that can give you strength in a dry land. Watch this, Satan. Stop looking for life in places and look for life in your relationship with God. John chapter 15, Jesus says, I'm the true vine. Whosoever is connected to me bringeth forth much fruit. Refrium is a place where relationships are tested. Everybody experience a dry place experience. But the question is, like I asked you, how do I find water in dry places? I'm glad you asked 3 things. Point number 1, don't allow your dry place to question your relationship with God. Are y'all going to walk with me here? Verse 3 says, wherefore is this that thou hast brought us up out of Egypt to kill us? Their complaint was, Sister Wheeler, that God has brought us out of Egypt just to let us die in the desert. Salem noticed they are talking to Moses, but they're actually talking about God. They're complaining to Moses, but they're actually complaining to God, because God was leading Moses and Moses was leading the people. So if they end up a place with no water, it's not only Moses' fault, but it's God's fault, because God was leading Moses and Moses was leading the people. Right here in the text, but notice they were speaking to God. Moses says, why do you tempt God? Their criticism of God was prompted by their lack of resources in the land. Watch this, don't miss me when I tell you this. Whenever you lack resources, we often question God's ability to provide. Whenever you get broke, you wonder if God is a provider of your needs. Whenever you get sick, you wonder, is God a healer? Whenever you get down, you wonder if God can bring you up. It's their criticism of God. When we lack money, we question if God can provide. Yet in the criticism is the forgetfulness of the people. Let me show you what I'm talking about. In verse 3, it says, God has brought us out of Egypt only to kill us in the wilderness. You missed it. I'm going to try this again. God brought us up out of Egypt to kill us in the wilderness. You missed it again. I'm going to try it one more time. God has brought us up out of Egypt to kill us in the wilderness. Y'all missed it again. God brought us up out of Egypt to kill us. And maybe an usher know what I'm talking about. God brought us up out of Egypt to kill. Preacher, do you know what I'm talking about? God has brought us up out of Egypt to kill us in the wilderness. Ignorant, if God brought you out of Egypt, don't you know he can give you water in a dry place? Y'all miss me when I'm talking about here. It's often we get forgetful of what God has already done. Let me tell you, what God has done in your past is the guarantee for what God can do in your future. Let me say, what God has done in your past is the guarantee for what God can do in your future. Let me take you to Sunday school. Let me correct this criticism. God brought you out of Egypt. You saying God can't provide you water? Don't you remember when God sent an army of flies? You remember when God sent some locusts? You remember when you took a stick and you put it in the Nile River and the river turned into blood? Don't you remember when Moses threw some dust in the earth and it turned to gnats? Don't you remember when I wish I can talk to somebody here. Don't you remember when God sent boars and everything died? Do you remember when God killed all the fish? Do you remember when Pharaoh got so scared of your God, he said, get out of here and you can take all my money with you? Don't you remember when you had the Red Sea in front of you and God said, be still and see the salvation of the Lord? Don't you remember when God got you over Big Mama died? Don't you remember when God paid the last bill? Don't you remember when God gave you joy the last time? Don't you remember when you got over the last heart attack? Don't you remember when you got over the last depression? Don't you remember when I brought you up yesterday? Don't you remember Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday? Don't you remember 2019, 2018, 2017? Don't you remember the 80s, the 90s, the 70s, the 60s? Don't you remember what I have done for you? And you're telling me I could do all of that, but I can't quench your thirst. You're telling me I can do all of that for you, but I can't pay a light bill. I can do all of that, but I can't get you over the flu. I can do all of that. Let me tell you, if I got enough power to wake you up in the morning, I said, if God got enough power to wake you up in the morning, he got enough power to do anything he wants to do. And the criticism of God is the forgetfulness of the people. God brought you out of Egypt so simply he can provide water. What God has done in the past is guaranteed for what he will do. This illustrates why the Bible is so relevant today. This is not just a bunch of stories, because it tells me Reverend Wheeler, if God can give Peter power to walk on water, I can walk on asphalt. If God can call Lazarus from the grave, if he can transform a dead man, he can transform my credit score. Somebody ought to walk with me here. If God can do all of that, woo, somebody ought to shout with me. I'm just thinking about all the stuff God can do. I'm just thinking, if he can raise the dead, if he can heal the sick, if he can give sight to the blind, if he can unstop deaf ears, if God can do all of that, I know that he can handle my little problems right here. Right here in the text. Requiem was, and don't forget. Somebody tell somebody, don't forget. Don't forget what God has done. It's dangerous to sit by forgetful Christians, because sometimes we forget what God has done, that we stop remembering what God can do. If you want to know what God can do, just look at what he's already done. And if that don't make you shout, ask your neighbor, what did God do for you? I like to be around folk that's been through something. So when I'm going through, I can ask, did the Lord pick you up? And if the Lord picked you up, then I know he can pick me up. Because Big Mama used to tell me there's no secret what God can do. If he does it for somebody else, he can do the same thing for you. I got news for you. God ain't no one-trick pony. If he do it once, he can do it again. But let me make you shout. When he do it the second time, he does it better than he did the first time. I wish I can shout with somebody right here, right here. Yeah. Watch this. That's the first thing, but we got to understand this. Point number 2. Don't focus on your problems. Focus on your proximity. I said, don't focus on your problems. Focus on your proximity. Let me take you to the text. Rephidim. The next city was Mount Sinai. Before God led them out of Egypt, he said, I'm going to meet you at Sinai. They in Rephidim. But the next time is Mount, y'all missed that point right there. God said, I'm going to meet you at Mount Sinai. They in Rephidim. But the next town is, y'all ain't going to pray for it. It's like God said, I'm going to meet you in Garland. And you living in Mesquite. It's like God said, I'm going to meet you in Oak Cliff. And you in Pleasant Grove. The next time, y'all ain't going to shout with me. What I'm trying to get you to understand, the people got so frustrated with God because they were focusing on the problem of where they were and not how close they were to where God was. Y'all ain't going to shout with me here. I got news for you. Stop worrying about your problem and worried about your proximity. I may have problems on Monday, but I got a new blessing on Tuesday. And guess what? The day after Monday is what? I wish I can shout right here. That's why I like the 7-day forecast. I tell you all the time, I look at it as a pastor. I got to look at it because I know Baptist folk don't come when it rains. And so I look at it, and when I see it, they say it's going to rain Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And I say, hurry up and get to the weekend. Hurry up and get to the weekend. It's going to rain all week, but it's going to be clear on Saturday. I said, give me the Sunday. It's going to be 65 and sunny on Sunday. I said, hallelujah. Because what that means is I can handle rain Monday through Friday when I know I'm going to have sunshine on the weekend. What I'm trying to get you to understand, stop worrying about what the weatherman say about today and asking what you're going to do tomorrow. And I got news for you. I can dance in the rain today when I know the sun is going to shine tomorrow. I am too close to where God is going to bless me to give up right now. I got news for you. You too close to give up. You too close to get depressed. You too close to say, I'm not going to make it. You too close. I got news for you. The devil wants you to get so wrapped up in the day that you forget about tomorrow. Because the enemy's plan is want you to believe that the problems of today can stop tomorrow. Read from demonstrate that the relationship between position and proximity. And let me tell you, let me give you a story. A few months ago, I had a blowout on the freeway on 635. You know that's dangerous. Had a blowout in my car, and I pulled over to the side of the road, and I was so upset. I said, they'll make me late. Done threw my schedule off. I ain't going to have time to do everything I need to do. I called a wrecker. I'm waiting on a tow truck. You know how we get when we get mad. I'm saying some ungodly stuff. And I said, where in the world is this tow truck? You better come here. I got a job. I got a place to be. I got a place to go. Tow truck pulled up, hooked me up, and he said, well, at least you broke down in a good place. I said, what are you talking about? I broke down in a good place. What are you talking about? He said, well, Discount Tire is the next exit. Y'all ain't gonna pray with me here. I was so focused on my blowout tire that I didn't realize the next exit had more tires than I needed. So let me tell you, sometimes God will let you break down in a good place. Somebody ought to shout with me right here in the rod. I broke down in a good place. I got down in a good place. I was too close. I'm complaining about what I'm going through, but I don't realize what God got at the next exit. I got news for you, baby. You better open your eyes and look down the road at what God got planned for you at the next exit. You talking about you're hungry, but there's a golden corral at the next exit. You talking about you thirsty, but there's a spring at the next exit. You talking about you ain't got nobody, but there's a husband at the next exit. You talking about you ain't, I wish I can be real with somebody here. Somebody ought to tell your neighbor it's at the next exit. It's at the next exit right here. You too close. It's at the next exit. It's at the next exit. Your breakthrough is at the next exit. Your healing is at the next exit. Your joy is at the next exit. Your restoration is at the next exit. Your joy is at the next exit. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy is at the next exit. I may be down today, but I'll be up at the next exit. Don't write me off tonight, because just hold on to the next exit. I'm too close to be defeated. I'm too close to be down. I got news for you, baby. Just hold on to the next exit. I don't know what you're waiting on. I don't know what you're going through, but somebody ought to shout, just wait to the next exit. I don't know what somebody ought to grab your neighbor by the hand and say, don't give up. Hold on to the next exit. Somebody ought to shout with me, there's peace at the next exit. There's restoration at the next exit. There's blessing at the next exit. There's money at the next exit. There's a new job at the next exit. There's a new promotion at the next exit. There's healing at the next exit. There's restoration at the next exit. I got news for you. The same God that right here in the text. I got to preach again. I got to hold my voice. Right here, point number 3. Point number 3, because of their proximity, God made provisions. Y'all going to walk with me. Notice, God's provision did not require additional resources. Now, I admit I had a little problem with that. God says, to get what you need, I don't have to give you more. I just need to show you how to use what you got. That bothered me, because I got a new problem. God said, I don't need to give you something else. I just need to show you how to use what you got. God, we in the desert. I got a rod. God said, you don't need nothing else. I just need to show you how to use what you got. God, this job don't pay me enough. You don't need something else. I need to show you how to use what you got. God, I don't have enough strength. I just need to show you how to use what you got. God, I don't have enough people in my life. You don't need more people. I want to show you how to use what you got. God, I don't have the education. You don't need a degree on the wall. I just need to show you how to use what you got. God, they got a BMW. I ain't got nothing but a Honda. God said, you don't need a BMW. I just need to show you how to use what you got. Are y'all going to walk with me here? In verse 5, he said, take the rod in your hand.
Thank you, Dr. Lee, the same rod that you picked up on the backside of Sinai. The same rod that you touched the Red Sea and turned it into blood. The same rod that you held it up to the Red Sea and the sea opened up to you. Let me tell you, you got enough power in that stick. Y'all ain't going to shout with me right here. He said, you don't need something new. Just take the same rod. Now get you some of the elders to go with you. And I'm going to stand in front of you. And I'm going to stand on the rock of Horeb. Now, this don't seem right, Sister Wheeler, because how can you bring water out of rocks? That don't make sense now. I took a few science classes, but rocks are things with no water. But God said you don't need something different. You just need to watch me. And let me show you how to use what you got. This is a desert region. God, I don't have enough. How am I going to get it unless you give me something different? God said, let me show you what you need. Just take your same rod, and I want you to go up in front of people because this is going to be a public display. I got news for you, baby. Sometimes God will bless you in public. I know God can bless me in private, but every once in a while, he'll let everybody know what you're going through, not to embarrass you, but to show that the God that's standing with you can bless you no matter what is in front of you. He said, don't worry. Take the rod in your hand. In my sanctified imagination, Moses goes up in front of the people, and he takes this rod, and he says, I'm here now, God, what do you want me to do? God said, strike the rock. Now, that ain't going to do nothing, God, because the rock don't have no water. He said, just do what I tell you. And when I studied this, I said, God, this don't make sense. God said, go to your bookshelf and pull out a commentary on the book of Exodus. I went to my bookshelf and I said, God, this don't make sense. He said, look at the commentary of chapter 17. I said, God, this don't make sense. You can't pull water out of rock. He said, idiot, just do what I tell you. Just read the book. And I read it. And they told me in this desert region, there was a certain type of stone that had some porous sections on the inside of it. And during the rainy season, the rain would collect in these air pockets in the midst of the stone. And the only way to get the water out of the rock, you got to break the surface of the rock. And when you break the surface of the rock, all the water that was trapped inside will flow out. I got news for you. I didn't come to convince you to give. I didn't come to convince you. I just came to crack the surface. Because there's some stuff that's down on the inside of us. God said, if you just don't tell me what you don't have, just use what you do have. And when he cracked the surface, water came from Moses, cracked the surface. And the Bible says that the water came out. The rocks look deceiving. They look like they're not going to be anything. They look like they are not the source of refreshment. But God said, if you just crack the surface, watch I provide you what you need. If you just crack the surface, watch I make ways out of no ways. If you just crack the surface, watch I make you go from lack to abundance. If you just crack the surface, watch I take you from confusion in the jar. If you can just crack the surface, watch I take you from not enough to more than enough. If you just crack the surface, watch I make your enemies your footstool. If you just crack the surface, I got news for you. I came to faith not because I understood theology, but my Sunday school teacher cracked the surface. And I said, it's something about this man named Jesus. I don't know about you, but I came to tell somebody you don't need a new miracle. All you need is to crack the surface. You don't need a new heart. You don't need a new mind. You just crack the surface. And watch what you've been praying for come out. But let me tell you this last thing. The Bible says when the water came out, the Hebrew says it was a sustained source. It's not that the water dripped out. The water kept running out. Y'all missed that point. They were in a land that ran out of water. But when they cracked the surface, God gave them a rock that would run out forever. I got news for you. What God did yesterday, it's still flowing today. It's like when my mama cooked dressing. She makes enough for tomorrow Y'all ain't going to pray. When God blesses you, he gives you more than you can handle today. Because the same rock that provided water last year is still flowing today. Because I want you to remember, it's no secret what God can do. You don't have to understand it, just be obedient to his word. And watch God bring water out of dry places. You don't need a new situation. You just need to take your same rod and crack the surface and watch God give you exactly what you need.